we always say, we joke that when we open our door in the morning, we don't know who's going to turn up or who's going to walk in or what's going to happen. And back on the 14th of May, we had this lovely young couple, older couple came in, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, who live in Penrith. I was in the office and David, our volunteer, came in and said, oh, there's a couple, they've got some historic artefacts that they want to come back to Grasmere to be held in safekeeping, but they don't know who best to talk to about it. So I went out to have a word with them. And they had a lot of things relating to Grasmere. Mrs. Thompson's grandfather, Joseph Sandon, was a resident of Grasmere. Anyway, so we said, yes, we'll have them. We can't keep them, but I immediately thought of my neighbour Andrew, who I knew was in this historical group. And I thought, if there's some way these things can come back to the village, be held in safekeeping at Dove Cottage, appreciated. Anyway, this couple were very, very delighted with this idea, went off to the car, came back, and when we saw what they had, we just couldn't believe it. There's one thing in particular that is unique, and it is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to see this object. So they had various things. They had books, a lovely old letter on headed newspaper from a hotel not far from here, photographs, a lot of things to do with Grasmere sports. There's one very special thing that Andrew will reveal, but I think he's going to start with this photograph. Now, this is Grasmere Cricket Club in 1929, and Mrs. Thompson's grandfather is Joseph Sandon. Now, Andrew's gone away and done a bit of research, found out lots of interesting things, and I think you're going to start with this photograph, aren't you, Andrew?
Yes, I am. Thank you. And hopefully, here, on here. Can we all see that? Good.
I'll just move
Right.
over here.
This is a very typical photograph that exists in many families, a group of Grandad and his friends from a certain period. This, obviously, is Grasmere Cricket Club, and dates 1929. But what's good about it, or wonderful about it, is that people are named. So often you get just the photograph, you don't know who they are, where they are, or even the date. But this has got everything on it. Of course, when I see a list of names, I start nosing around a little bit, as is my wont. And the first one I see is Reverend J.B. Phillips, second one on the top row, and he was the rector at Grasmere from 1923 to 1939, so that's quite a long stretch. And it was Reverend John Branch Phillips, a very unusual name, I thought. The next gentleman along is Mr. Allenby. Unfortunately, I don't think we've got any Allenbys in the village just now, but we've had many over the years. I haven't researched each one of these, it would take too long. Next one is Mr. Borwick. Again, Mr. Fred Borwick in this case, who I believe lived on Lake Road and hired the boats out. Do correct me, anybody, if I've got hold of the wrong end of the stick of these. Then there are three Wilsons. Any photograph of Grasmere will have one or more Wilsons on it. Two J. Wilsons, so they do make it difficult to come into to sort out. The gentleman in the middle with the V-neck jumper on is William Ashcroft, who became Sir William, who used to live at the Wyke, and in the 30s he was certainly listed as a major landowner. On the front row, far side there, is the young boy Gibson, I think was the grocer's, is that right?
Yeah.
And the gentleman next to him, not the one in the invalid carriage, sitting there, is one Reverend Christopher William Wordsworth, who was the great-grandson of William Wordsworth and a very keen sportsman, although he's about 50 at this time. He was an Oxford hockey blue, played rugby for Clifton in Bristol, and was also playing member of Westmoreland cricket team. I resisted the temptation to say he was a good catch for Grasmere Cricket Club. He was the master in charge of Loretto School in Edinburgh, so Jeff might know why was he here during the summer, who did he stay with, I don't know, but that's him. The gentleman in the invalid carriage and the person next to him are both called Mr. Lee, and Will know some information on them.
Yes. I'm just going to stand quickly because
I'm really interested in this photograph because it's the first time I'd seen a photograph of Edmund Lee on the left in the back line there, and Arthur Stanley Lee in the carriage on the right hand side. They were brothers. Their father was also called Edmund Lee. Their father was the Edmund Lee who previously owned Dove Cottage. And when their father left Dove Cottage, their father moved to Lakeview, was the second property he had in the village. And then at this period in time, they, with their father, would have been living at Rylands, just opposite the pub in the village. Some people may or may not know, and this might overlap with what people know in the ring, that Edmund Lee actually, after this photograph was taken in 1938, married Una Heaton Cooper, which is William Heaton Cooper's sister. So there's a kind of a connection to Grasmere artistic communities there too. But I'm intrigued by this Edmund Lee because this Edmund Lee wrote 3 novels that were all set in Grasmere in 1911 onwards. The one that's probably best on Grasmere is 1911's Helga Lloyd, which actually has a scene with the cricket team. It has a scene in the novel with Grasmere playing Langdale at cricket in the cricket field opposite what was the Gold Reel site. And I'm just going to, before disappearing again, read, there's 2 paragraphs within Helga Lloyd, which is a very seasonal novel that give you a flavour of what the book is and are apt for this time of year. August had come, but at present there was none of the heat and closeness which one associates with that month, especially in the Vale of Grasmere. The heavy rains of late July had cleared the air, and on this Saturday afternoon, but for the full green of the trees, it might have been April. There had been frequent showers in the morning, but about noon it had brightened, and now shade and sunshine alternated as the billowy white clouds passed over the deep blue of the sky. It was a spring day in midsummer, with all the brightness and sparkle of the earlier season, and the hill peaks stood out vividly in the crystal clearness of the atmosphere. Grasmere was astir, for this was the day on which was held the annual rush-bearing procession, and practically every inhabitant of the village and the neighbouring houses would be found ere long in the road before the church.
Thanks very much. So, all these people, characters, all with their own story to tell. But the gentleman we should be looking at is the umpire on this end of the top row, with a pipe in his mouth, and that is Mr. Joseph Sandham, who is the grandfather of the lady who brought the things in to Rebecca.
Mrs. Thompson.
So, I had Joseph Sandham, Grasmere, 1929. I'll soon find out about him. So I duly entered it into various searches. Nothing. Looked up in various guides. Absolutely nothing. Now, some of you most probably have this thing where you'd be looking for things yourself, and it's very frustrating. Then I discovered he in fact was an employee of Manchester Waterworks and lived to the other side of the Raise. So I went into Thelmere and Wyburn and did in fact find a Joseph Sandham mentioned on a plaque in Wyburn Church. Unfortunately, it was commemorating his death in the First World War, Joseph Sandham, aged 20, which puzzled me. Then I realised he was the eldest son of this Joseph Sandham, who lived at Helvellyn House. So I found a name, place, family. Right. Where's Helvellyn House, thought I. Get out the maps. No. Scratch my head. I've never heard of it. It sounds like something you've heard of, Helvellyn House. But I hadn't. And it was only when Mrs. Thompson, that I asked her where was Helvellyn House, this is the lady whose grandfather this is, she said, oh yes, I don't remember it. And it was demolished. And I thought, well, he lived there after the reservoir had been built, so it wasn't demolished to make the reservoir. No, it demolished in the 1930s. And in fact, there was quite a large hamlet at the south end of Thelmere. You see it in the red box there, a cluster of building. The south end is the bit nearest us, if you're wondering. The bottom of the Raise, there was a little hamlet there. All that now remains is the church. This is a blow-up of it. It's not very clear, I'm afraid. And this was demolished in 1937. Helvellyn House is one of these houses. Which one, I don't know. There were in fact two pubs there. The Nag's Head and the Cherry Tree.
Well, we could have given them a prize for guessing before.
And the Nag's Head, the landlady, was a Mrs. Eason, who I came across later on. If it's the same Mrs. Eason or the next generation, was licensee of Travellers with Jack and went to live in Tarn Cottages up at the top of White Moss. And I spent a long time in conversation with them when I was working for the Trust, never thinking her name would come up again. So 2 pubs and the house there. About a week ago I was rummaging in my postcard collection. Nothing to do with this at all. I found quite a nice postcard of Penrith. Nothing to do with this at all. I turned the back over and it's addressed to, unfortunately he's not here, Mr. J. Beatty, Wyburn, via Grasmere. Wyburn was considered to be part of Grasmere. The post came from there. They played cricket for Grasmere. So being a bit of a nosy person, I read it. Again, a reference to cricket. Have you finished haymaking yet? How many scores, good scores, have you made lately? And then it says, remember me to Joe Sandham and Mrs. Easton. And I thought, it's a bit weird. I'd never heard of this Joe Sandham at all. And his name's been, and I've had that maybe 20 years, you know, at least, and never read it. Right, we'll leave Joe Sandham comfortably in Helvellyn House, having quite a puff on his pipe, and move down south to London. This is in the roaring 20s, remember, 1925 we're talking about, and we come across a John Leeming, a 30-year-old gentleman who was quite a socialite, but also a very able person. He was an early aviator. He did in fact set up the first Aero club in Britain, which was the Lancashire Aero Club. They were called Aero clubs rather than flying clubs, because in Lancashire, a flying club meant pigeons, not aircraft at all. And he wasn't the sort of gentleman who would be involved in flying pigeons. We came across him at a party at Chez Victor's in London, given by Sir Sefton Branca. These like names out of Bertie Wooster. And I think this is the sort of place it was. And this Sefton Branca was in fact the director of civil aviation. And after a meal at Rags, he called it, which was the Army and Navy Club, apparently. So you can imagine going, after a meal at Rags, we went there, we had a few brandies and we did this. And then Sir Sefton says, we need some publicity for aviation. I think you ought to get a plane and fly to the top of a mountain. Go and land on the top of Snowdon. So after a few brandies, our John Lee said, sounds a good idea, that. Jolly wheeze, yes, I'll do that. And he went to AV Rose, the manufacturers of airplanes, and said, will you give me a plane, please? I want to land on the top of Snowdon. And he'll get some good publicity. And the manager director said, no, out. And he was quite offended at this. He thought it was a good idea. Anyhow, he went back and told his friends, and they said, yes, I'm not quite feeling, because it's not a good place to land an airplane on the top of Snowdon. But I know where there is a good place. Top of Helvellyn. So he said, oh, right, that's much better. Said, oh, yes. So he went back to Rose and said, right, scrap the Snowdon idea. Can you give me one to land on Helvellyn, please? But unfortunately, the manager director got abroad at this stage, or fortunately, maybe, because he hassled the rest of the directors until he got his plane. but it had no certificate of airworthiness because it was a new prototype. But the press were already onto this because it was a publicity stunt. And the press got hold of it, and this, I apologise for the standard of the picture, don't blame me, blame the 1920s. This is them testing the plane so they can get it. This is John Leeming on this side of the picture. Next to him is the man from the ministry. His hands in his pockets, briefcase on the floor, and a couple of chaps with their hats on working on this aeroplane. And I think that's as much as he did. And he said, yes, right, fine, no problem. I'll give you a certificate of airworthiness, but only between Helvellyn and Woodford, which is an airstrip just south of Manchester, near Stockport. So it then had its certificate. Remember, he was taking this to the top of Helvellyn, was the idea. And that is the top of Helvellyn. And if you imagine landing a plane on there, a bit tricky. But he wasn't put off. But he thought, really, they ought to look first at Helvellyn. He'd never been. So he thought he'd go. So I decided to go up to Cumberland by car. I'll read his own words for this, if you don't mind. And actually inspect the natural aerodrome, this is in quotes, just like a billiard table at the summit. For how good this place might be, it was obviously a sensible thing to have a look at it before actually landing. The city of Manchester draws its water supplies from Thirlmere. They're situated at the foot of Helvellyn, and the ground all round there belongs to the corporation. I approached the civic authorities and found them willing to assist. At Thirlmere, they had a man in charge who had been there for many years and knew every foot of the country. It was arranged that I should go to Cumberland the following weekend. He got a friend to take him up by car, which must have been an adventure in itself. I will pass rapidly over that terrible weekend. Quite honestly, I believe I then suffered more actual pain, more physical misery than I've ever done in the whole of the rest of my life. Perhaps I should explain here that I am no walker. I do not like walking. It makes me feel ill. And in my opinion, Providence never gave mankind legs to be misused in this way. I am not ashamed to say that I am the kind of person who, if he walks from Charing Cross to Piccadilly Circus, sinks down in a chair and speaks feelingly of the effects of exercise. That's about half a mile, by the way, so here's the centre of the village. A friend of mine named Hayes accompanied me to Sandham, who was in charge at Thirlmere, welcomed us and suggested that as it was nearly 1 o'clock in the afternoon, it would be dark in another 3 hours. We should hurry up Helvellyn at once. He was, although I did not realise it then, an experienced and hardened mountain climber who was anxious to get us up and down again before night came on. I will not attempt to describe that afternoon of agony. For the last mile to the summit, there was ice in places. Oh, I forgot to tell you, it's December, by the way. There was ice in places along the path, and at every patch of ice, Hayes and I fell, hurting ourselves excruciatingly. Twice on my way down, I implored Sandham to leave me. I really meant it, and his retort as he pulled me up to my feet that I should die of exposure. I regarded that as heartless and irrelevant. Let me make clear that both Hayes and I must have been almost unconscious on the way down, our exhausted brains numbed and out of action. I can prove this statement quite simply. At one point, Hayes fell down a small cliff, perhaps about 10 feet in the air. He walked straight off the edge blindly, and he fell. And he still continued walking. I saw this distinctly. So he was not impressed with Helvellyn very, very much. Anyhow, his pal Hayes says, well, how are you going to get out of this one then? You've got the aeroplane, you made a fuss, the papers are onto it. It's not going to be easy. But I saw a little bit lower down that was flatter, wider, more suitable. We'll go for that. So he explained this to Sandham. Mr. Sandham, beg his pardon, I'm picking up the upper classes thing here.
Boarding school, Sandham.
Yes, Mr. Sandham, and he arranged for 3 or 4 of his men to clear the stones off this bit of land near the summit, and they would form a welcome committee, and they would light fires, to give smoke off so he could tell the direction of the wind and the strength of the wind. So it was all then set up. He had his plane, he had the landing place, and he even got an extra member to help him, because the test pilot of AV Rose said he wanted to be involved as well. So they did. Now, we go up here, press the right button. That is the plane, the actual plane, that's this plane's number. So you can see from it, it's not a large, robust thing. Single engine, biplane, 2 people in it, and with that they were going to fly to Helvellyn.
Looks a bit flimsy, doesn't it?
The top of Helvellyn to boot. So, I said it was December. December 15th, the weather in Grasmere was given out a strong north wind, but clear. They had arranged for somebody from Grasmere, and I cannot find out who it was, to send him the weather reports. But then when they tried to start the engine, they decided to go for it, December 15th. The engine wouldn't start. Eventually it did start. Anybody that's driven a pre-war car knows the sort of technology we're dealing with. And then they set off. I like the navigation system. They didn't set off till noon, because they had a bit late with the engine. Dark at 4 o'clock in December? But he followed the railway line north from Wigan to Lancaster, where they had to refuel. So it could only go from Manchester to Lancaster, then Lancaster, Helvellyn. But Sandham and friends were waiting on the top. But then they hit turbulence. Large turbulence, if that's the right phrase. They dropped 300 feet in one of them. This is the map. It was raining, it was hail, and then they just could not see in the hail at all. They had a very close shave with the side of another fell, and decided that was it, and they abandoned it and went back to Manchester. Via Lancaster to refuel again on the way down. So then they had to sit and wait for the weather to clear. Impatiently, however. By 21st of December, it's just over a week later, another good forecast. The watchers were sent out, and off to Lancaster they went. But if we look at the aeroplane a little closer, you'll see that it's a totally open cockpit. There's a tiny little windscreen in front of them, and that's all. So this is what they're flying in. So they went up to Lancaster again, refueled, set off, and then the wind got up even more. The gale was so strong that the plane was stationary. So then they went back to Lancaster, came up again, and the engine started playing up. So they parked it on a field, went to a local farm, got some ropes and tarpaulin, covered it up, and went to the nearest hotel for the night. Whilst they were having dinner, the pilot says to him, "Oh damn, I forgot to bring my money with me. Have you got some? You'll have plenty." He said, "No, I haven't got any actually, because I didn't think we were staying overnight. I meant to be going back home again." Oh, never mind. So they finished their meal, went to bed, had a night's rest, got up in the morning to be faced with a very irate manager. Because Leaning told him, "Oh, put a cheque in the post for you." He wasn't used to this sort of thing in Lancaster, he'd make it away with it in London. But he said, "No, you must pay me now, and this gentleman's staying here until you come back with the money." And he went out and he found a nearby garage that was very helpful, and the guy thought it was a wonderful thing that they were trying to do. He said, "Oh, I'd like to be involved with this as well." So he got the car out, went round to the hotel, paid the bill, said, "If you want some petrol, I'll bring you some." And he took petrol out, and he also took his mechanics out to repair the new spark plug, sort of all it was. This is the trouble with these sort of engines. And everything was fine again. So, they were ready to go back to Manchester that day. But it was nice weather. So, Leeming convinced his friend Bert that, let's give it another go. And he said, no, we can't. Anyhow, he gave in. So, off they went. They're flying over Windermere, and the engine starts coughing and spluttering, and it lost 500 feet. So, oh dear me, what do we do now? We have to land. Simple. Well, they did land at Calgarth Hall, which most of you will know. It's just this side of Troutbeck Bridge. It was, and I have one contemporary photo that is not very clear, because it was an orthopaedic hospital. And with a lot of flat land, the lake is down here somewhere, it overlooks the lake. And they managed to land in there, on their ground. And the children saw this thing coming out of the sky on December the 22nd. It's Father Christmas! I was rather disappointed to find out he wasn't. Anyhow, they cleared out the carburettor, a bit of grit, as they do, and decided to go on. Ethel Headley Hospital was still there 40 odd years afterwards. That's what it looks like today. It's now a retirement home. In fact, when I came to Grasmere in 1969, it was still a hospital. And in fact, that's where I had my first job in Westland as a teacher at Ethel Headley. So again, strange coincidence, it comes up. And I believe Joy McGuinness was a nurse there at one time. Yes. Yeah. And it was a long stay, public children's hospital, orthopaedic mainly in my time, TB before that. But unfortunately, it closed after 12 months. That was me being there. Right, back to where we're supposed to be doing. Our friends head off to Helvellyn on a good morning, a nice morning. Everything's set up nicely. Over Grasmere, we encountered our old enemy, bumps. Bumps that made the ones we'd previously experienced seem like gentle zephyrs. There's one that stands out in my memory. And another, I'm not reading it all. In another bump, the cushion on which Hinkler was sitting shot out of the machine. Hinkler, held by his belt, he's the co-pilot, remained. But the cushion, which was not tied down, flew upwards when his weight left it for the moment. Incidentally, this cushion was picked up some days later by Sandham and retained by him as a memento. I was shown it recently when I visited Helvellyn House, and this is in fact the cushion that he went up to catch, to bring down as a souvenir. So.
You said it was unique, once in a lifetime, didn't we? There's only one of these in the world. I have sat on it.
Right, they then landed quite easily on the summit, claims, a few circuits, and then they went down. Where they landed, if I can go back to the summit, which I'm sure I can, eventually. They landed on the summit, but of course it was very steep. And they had to keep the propeller going to keep the plane pointing upwards on the slope to stop it rolling backwards, while Leeming jumped out, put a pile of rocks behind the wheels, they're very high-tech stuff, to stop it rolling back, and then they could cut the engine. While they were coming down to land, they saw a figure behind the cairn on the top of Helvellyn. And it turned out he was a Professor Dodds. We had academics all around the place in those days, even. who was a professor of Greek from Birmingham University. And he was more than somewhat surprised. He'd just gone up for a walk. So they said, will you be the witness to say that you saw us land and sign a piece of paper to that effect? Quite a good witness to have, really, professor,
Of Greek.
And then they realised they had no paper or pencil with them. But fortunately, the good professor went into his bag and came up with an old hotel bill and a stump of a pencil, and duly made out his little thing. I witnessed this play and that number, land on Helvellyn at this date. And they thanked him profusely. And then Leeming went and took, give me a minute, a photograph which is very, very faded. These are just newspapers, and as you can see, they've been kept in with sellotape, which is a good lesson in itself. Do not use sellotape at archives ever. And the newspaper is faded badly. Make out plain all right? Yeah. The gentleman in the long coat is the professor, looking absolutely amazed. That is the pilot fiddling round, and Leeming took the photograph. Just on a little simple camera, nothing special at all. And having done that, they would take off. But they were, you get some idea of them being on the ledge at the top there. They were 30 yards from the edge, which is much longer than this building, really. So they had to rev up this engine, hit the edge, and hope the engine had enough power to take off. They were 5 yards off the edge, and the wheels were still on the ground. At the last minute, it went over, took a bit, as it were, and then they could fly off down to Lancaster. Now, before they left a little tin on the summit with a note in it for Joseph Sandman. This is just a blog that somebody did. Photographs were taken. A letter in a tin box was left for Sandman, which still exists today in a relative's house in Penrith. You get used to this, aren't you? No, it doesn't. It's here. This is the letter that they left on the summit for Sandman, and that is it. It's a copy of it. This is very fragile, so if you want to look at it, please be very careful, because it's still folded up in the same folds it was in when it was put into the tin, which I think is quite a nice thing to keep. And it just says, "Dear Mr. Sandman, sorry not to have seen you. We took the only and first chance we could. Many thanks. Without your help, the flight to Helvellyn could never have taken place. Yours, John F. Leeming." And you notice it's written on the hotel paper, in the hotel where they stayed in Lancaster the night before, where they couldn't pay the bill. But he still managed to pinch a piece of paper to write this note on. So that's been kept for nearly 90 years by this family, which is quite remarkable, really, a little piece of paper like that. You can see how relatives clearing a house would, you know, and that as well is hardly a work of art or, you know, something you'd hang on the wall, but it's special. Well, to me it is. Then they then went back to Lancaster, refueled again, and went on their way. There's a postscript to this little tale. In 1936, John Leeming wrote, "I wish to say, because there had been a huge fuss, about, the papers were full of it. Guardian ran 2 full page, and they were big pages then, proper pages, 2 column inch all the way down. Everybody had their picture, and it was big news. No television, of course. No internet, I believe, either. No Facebook. I don't know how they publicised anything. So he wrote in the mid-30s, "I wish to say that if any credit is due to me in connection with Helvellyn, it is for that climb on foot, and not for the flying part of the affair. Had monuments been erected to this climb, had honours been showered upon me for this feat of endurance, I know I should have deserved them, every one of them." So he thought the flying was a piece of cake compared with the walking up there. He did put all his memoirs down in a book, which he didn't publish 10 years after this, and he didn't forget. 1936, the book was published of his memoirs, And this is the book that he sent to John Sandham. To Mr. Sandham, who helped so much with the Helvellyn flight, John F. Leeming. And it is, in fact, a proof copy, which, alas, I don't know whether this is normal, Jeff would know, or you would know, has no photos in it. So, which is a shame, because there were all the photos of various things. There's certainly one of the landing that was better than that one. But that is the book that he left for Mr. Sandham. He also wrote I don't know this about my depth of literature. Well, it's not really literature. Claudius the Bee, a children's book, which Walt Disney bought the rights of. So he was obviously an established writer that could write. In 1928, and he was only about 33 by then, he founded Northern Airlines Limited, which was a charter passenger flight, which used to fly out of Barton Airfield, north of Manchester. This proved too small, so the local people asked him, couldn't you find a larger place for an airport? And he came up with one place called Ringway, which of course is now Manchester International, and is only 2 or 3 miles from Woodford, from where they set off near Stockport. In fact, you most probably can see it when you take off in the right direction. Right, to bring our little circular flight back to Grasmere, there's a plaque on the top of Helvellyn, which some of you will know. Now this is a replacement plaque. The first one was actually done with lead letters, I believe, which the acidic rain soon took away. And it just says, the first aeroplane to land on a mountain in Great Britain did so on this spot on December the 22nd, 1926, I think it should be. Yes, it is. John Leeming and Bert Hinkler in an Aero 585 Gospel, that was the name of the plane, landed here, and after a short stay, flew back to Woodford. That plaque brings us back to Grasmere in a way, because the replacement one was provided under the auspices of the late Michael Berry from Crag House, who was managing director of English Lakes Hotels, I think, at the time. So our story does come around to Grasmere. And there I will finish for a moment. I'd like to say thank you to Will and to Rebecca and for Jeff for letting us use these splendid premises for these occasions, and especially thanks to you for listening so attentively. Thank you.